So it was around Christmas of last year, and I had been in the middle of a launch, but the program didn't start until January. So I was like, what can I do over the holiday season that will generate leads and get people through the door, warm them up into this program while I'm offline, while they're offline? And private podcasts filled that perfect gap, right? Because people can listen on the go.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast. Lindsay is here writing solo again. Nora is a bit under the weather, but I do have an amazing guest, and we are going to power through and we're going to learn a really cool way that you can use private podcasting for launching. So this is going to be exciting. Kelsey McCormick, why don't you do a brief intro and share about your company and the business model kind of structure, and we can dive into private podcasting.
Hi, everyone. Well, thanks for having me so much, Lindsay. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of this podcast. I'm Kelsey. I'm the founder of Coming Up Roses. It's a space for what I call squiggly creatives, service providers who are really creative, maybe like a little bit, sometimes feeling a bit disorganized, maybe like they have loads of ideas and they never have enough time. Um, and it provides courses, programs, and products for them to really hone in on their ideas, create really specific products around their skill set and their points of view, and market those. So it really helps them, I think, grow their sales, and it really helps them get clarity around what they stand for and who they are as a brand, I guess is the best way to put it.
Cool. Would you say you run mainly group programs and a course and not as much one-on-one?
Yeah, so I used to do a lot of one-on-one, but recently have kind of gone to a fully one-to-many model via
Cool.
programs, courses, and products, things like that. Yeah,
Awesome.
and then I'm getting into a bit of like panels and speaking gigs. I'm starting to write a book, so I'm definitely going more into that like personal brand side as well.
Very cool. Good to know. Cool. So, I'd love to talk a little bit about how you first got into private podcasting. If you can think back to like, did you consume someone else's? Did you see someone talking about it online? And what kind of made you go, this is what I want to add to my business?
It was actually probably through listening to this podcast. I'm not sure exactly who you had on, but I was listening to it just to kind of hear a little bit about just what the deal was and how people
Mm,
were using podcasts, because I love podcasts just as a consumer. And I noticed that there were a lot of people monetizing podcasts and a lot of people launching podcasts, but doing so privately within their programs or just doing like mini courses. And I had an idea for a precursor to one of my main programs that would teach people just like what they needed to know before they entered that program. And I was like, but I don't want to have to build out this entire another course, and I don't want it to cannibalize. I really want it to like be this really light touch lead in. So I didn't want it to have videos. And I just think people are craving, I don't know about you, but I feel like people are craving being offline more on the go. They like to learn while they're like with their kids or while they're like on a walk. So I just really had this interest toward it and found your platform, binged your podcast, your public podcasts, and then pretty quickly, yeah, signed up and got it going.
and got it from there. Yeah. So I think we connected on Threads. I'm like going back.
Yeah.
There was something popping off, and I was getting tagged, and then Threads has been such a great place for people to kind of share what they're trying out, like what they're doing, and so yeah, that kind of conversation on private podcasts was happening over there, and I have a feeling that's like how this all happened,
Yeah, I
which is
think
fun.
so. That might have been Threads, definitely. I'm such a fan of
Yeah.
Threads as well. It's such a great
Same.
discovery platform.
Cool. Okay. So I heard you basically kind of talk about the first idea is the thing we're going to talk about today, right?
Yeah, yeah, we can
Yeah,
talk about what that kind of became.
sure. And
It
that was literally the first podcast you launched, was this lead gen into your program? The first private podcast, I
Yes.
should say.
So it
Yeah.
was around Christmas of last year, and I had been in the middle of a launch, but the program didn't start until January. So I was like, what can I
Mm,
do over the holiday season that will generate leads and get people through the door, warm them up into this program while I'm offline, while they're offline? And private podcasts filled that perfect gap, right? Because people can listen on the go. And
yeah,
it
especially in the
became
holidays too, right? There's car
totally.
rides and traveling and all of that.
I think it's such an awesome seasonal offer if you're thinking about starting one in those times like the summer or the holidays. Thanksgiving, the times that people are with their families offline, not wanting to sit in front of a computer and watch a bunch of things, but have these like micro learning moments. I think it's like this perfect thing, especially if you're going to do. So I decided to make it paid because I'd already
Mm,
done like a lead gen for the launch that was free. So I was like, I don't
okay.
want to do another free thing over the holidays. I don't want it to be anything that's super high touch. So that's where I was like, let's do this private podcast. It's called The Warm Up. And it's really about
Mm.
how to help people like discover you as an online service provider,
Ah,
and then how to get them warmed up to your brand before you try to sell to them, which my program Launch Your Own Way is all about launching and sales. So it just filled this like perfect gap. And so many people who listened to that ended up converting into Launch Your Own Way because I have like little ads and stuff within private podcast, but it's this limited series mini course where you can basically learn like so many actionable tips in these like short and sweet episodes.
oh, I love that. Yeah, so there's something here that I wanna pull out for those listening because I think it's like an underrated use case that I think Nora and I obviously see a lot of private podcasts, but this idea of that gap you mentioned between someone signing up for something and then going to the next thing. It's that space of I signed up and then not that there's like regret or whatever, but there's that buyer's like, "Oh, I bought something," like, "Oh," and the a lot of people like to have something in between signing up, whether it's paid or free, and then whatever the experience is. And so, as we could consider this like a launch is totally experience, but there's this beautiful gap. And I think the gap exists. You're bringing up there's a gap between someone maybe signing up for your free thing on an email list and then your big launch where you're putting all this, content out. And it's cool. What can I do in between there to bridge that and have more people raise their hand and say, hey, like I'm really interested, not just a little, like really, I'll give you some cash, right? And so that's a beautiful gap. There's often a gap. I think it was Diane who came in the podcast and talked about a gap between someone signing up for their coaching and then, or maybe she was the discovery call, the gap between signing up for a discovery call and showing up. There's a gap. Someone else came on and talked about the gap between buying one-on-one services and your first call. There's a gap. So those beautiful spaces of time that separates the person from that transaction, whether it's free or paid or whatever. And so just wanted to highlight this because I don't think we've talked about one around free, getting on a list, a paid thing, and then in a launch so that there's this gap of time. And sometimes in a calendar, right? The gap could be a holiday, the gap could just be you getting ready, right? And trying to get more signups, but giving them something to do. This is the takeaway. Giving them something to do in that space between when they get the next delivery item from you, wherever that can show up in your business, a podcast is such a beautiful way to do that.
Yeah, and it definitely sets them up for better success within the program because if they listen to
Mm,
the podcast and action all the things in the podcast, then sign up for the program, they're doing that warm up that's necessary to have a
mm,
successful launch in the first place. And they have like a head start from the program. So that's really great.
totally.
Yeah, it's just the
Cool.
best. I really think it's the best way to kind of get people, you launch something, even if it's like mid-tier ticket, which is like Launch Your Own Way is at
Mm,
$1,400. So it's a pretty good investment,
mhm.
especially if you've never invested in anything I offer before. So it's a really low ticket investment, but it gives people buying power within my brand for me to say, okay, these people are probably going to be more qualified leads.
Mhm.
And also it gives them like, it builds trust with them before
Yeah,
they're going to invest a lot more into my program at a way like, I think when I launched it was $49, now it's $99.
cool. Is that evergreen now for folks? Like, they can buy that? Okay. So,
Yeah,
yeah, let's
totally
talk about the
evergreen.
structure of this funnel, and I'm sure there was, like, a first version and, like, what it's become, but let's go with, like, behind the scenes and kind of how you orchestrated it.
Yeah, so, the funnel looks like first people opt into a free workshop, and that is all around planning their launch and sales. And then from there, they get put into a funnel that tries to sell them into, the warm up, which is the private podcast. And then
Is that
from
an
there,
email funnel typically?
yeah, an email
That's the
funnel.
email funnel? Okay.
And then from there, they get sold into Launch Your Own Way, or if they buy the warm up, they get put into a funnel to purchase Launch Your Own Way. But there's kind of a couple of roads that lead to like my main program that I'm trying to hopefully convert them into.
Perfect. Okay, cool. And then the construction of you kind of mentioned there's so many, mini episodes, and then there's also ads, I'm doing air quotes, that you're running using Hello Audio and like dynamic ad insertion, I would imagine. So if you kind
Yep.
of want to talk about the structure of the podcast, that would be cool too.
Sure. Yeah. So the idea is like going through a funnel, right? What do you do when someone discovers you? How do you make sure that they stick around? And then what are the things that you can do after they click follow, after they subscribe to your email list to continue to nurture them and build trust with them so that by the time you launch whatever you're going to launch, they become long-term customers. So that's really just like the basic setup of the podcast. And I think like those episodes are like 10 to 15 minutes and there's like 8 of them. And then I also have interview episodes with past Launch Your Own Way
Mm.
alumni talking about their warm up process, what they did, what worked, what didn't work. Really amazing case studies for people who have like actually invested in the program and had a lot of success. And it's really great because I can showcase people who have a one on one model, high ticket studio, but I also have people who have launched courses off the back of Launch Your Own Way talking about that process. So no matter like what you're kind of selling, there's like a case study in there for you. So that's really fun
Mm.
as well.
Yeah. So where do you put those? Is it like after the learning content? Is it all released all at once, or are you dripping it or anything like
I
that?
dripped it over the holiday. Now all the episodes are out.
Mm.
Sometimes around a launch period, I'll do like a bonus Q&A episode that I'll upload or another interview with like alumni that have, been on it since the last time. And each of those is like a bonus episode at the end of the podcast. So you kind of get all 8 episodes. You can binge through those and then it goes into
Hmm.
the case study episodes.
Perfect. And then
Yeah.
what are you deciding to put as an ad spot and when do those run? Is it just running the whole time that the podcast is being listened to? It's because it's
Yeah,
evergreen.
so it is. It just has an evergreen $50 off code that is
Mm.
relevant, so I didn't have to, like, update it. So, actually,
Hmm.
instead of using dynamic, I just, like, have it really naturally
Yeah.
within
You
the
don't have
cadence
to.
of the program. But I do
Cool.
use or I have used dynamic ads on other offers before.
Yeah, so for those listening, that makes sense. So when you're running an evergreen product, I mean, I guess if for whatever reason you change the coupon, it would have to go back and edit it. But because it's dripped and because it's like constantly running, the dates, I'm doing air quotes, don't really matter. But what's cool about dynamic content is someone can subscribe to a podcast series and you could be running a $50 off code and then you could switch that off in Black Friday and run a Black Friday $100 off code, right? Without you having to re-record anything. And when it's live, that can be nice because you can cut off the date and the ad will stop running, but the podcast is still being able to be listened to. So when you're running live launches and you want it to be more off the cuff, an ad that's maybe very specific to a time frame, that's when you would use dynamic ad insertion and you can set dates for it to be delivered on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a good tool because there are other things that I have live launched with an
Mm-hmm.
audio podcast and then had to change out what the ad said. So, it's super,
Totally.
super awesome.
Cool. Okay, and so then let's talk a little bit, I guess, about the results. You kind of like hinted that there was pretty higher conversion rates for the folks that signed up and probably listened if you looked at your super listener score. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the results of this podcast.
Yeah, so I wish I had all the exact stats up at the moment because I went through them pretty in depth on another
Mm.
podcast called Cubicle to CEO.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember one of the biggest stats was I think I had like a pretty high amount of downloads. Again, I wish I had all those stats with me at the moment, but something like 70% of the people who listened to more than or no, 30% of the people who listened to more than 70% of the episodes converted
Ooh,
um into Launch Your Own Way. So that told
that's
me
a
that
cool
like
number.
if I can get people to listen to more of the
Hmm.
episodes, they're way more likely to convert. So
Mm.
I kind of did a campaign over the summer while I was out of office to go back to all the people who signed up and say, "Hey, like listen to all the episodes." Or I dropped a new Q&A episode to see if it got people to tune back in, just because I figured in the summer people were probably out and about more, wanting
Hmm.
to listen to podcasts, just trying to remind them to listen to it. So it's a massive conversion tool, and I probably need to do like another overview of exactly what it converted overall, but it made a really good amount of revenue. It was such a great tool for conversion, not only for the launch in February or in January, not for that cohort, but I launched it again in April. And people who were like, "Oh, I listened to the podcast last December, but I wasn't quite ready to buy then. But like now that you've launched again, I've like converted now." So it's a really amazing tool to warm up people, to continue to warm up people who might be in for the next launch as well.
Oh, I love that. That's such a like marketing 101, right? That nurture, don't give up on whatever numbers happen that first launch. The next time around, those folks who were like on the fence or had some other things come up in their life or business are now ready and raring to go. Okay, cool. And I also love the numbers that you're pulling because I think a lot of times people are like, oh, X percentage of people listen to this. Like I had 100 subscribers and 70 of them listened to something. And I think going deeper and being like, how far did they get in the podcast? Like, how much of the content did they consume? And you can look at this, there's various ways. You can break it down just by looking at the listener list on that feed and see, who downloaded stuff. But we have something called Super Listener Score, which
Yeah.
actually is an algorithm that's run on the back end that we've created that's it takes into a lot of things into consideration, but it's, number of feeds you have and how fast they listen to something and are they downloading the whole podcast series and listening to it. And so you can kind of sort by that and say, oh, somebody with an 80 or above is a super hot lead, right? And so if you're getting like somebody on a score of 70 above and you export that list of people and see what percentage of them converted, then you're looking at, yeah, if we could just get them to listen to more of the episodes, we're in business, right? And so that just gives you as a business owner something to focus on for the next launch when you have that kind of detailed conversion rates and numbers. Rather than, I think a lot of times, let's say the launch didn't do as well, and you're like, I don't know, maybe people don't like podcasts. Rather than scrap the whole thing since you have content, what can we dive into to say, like, oh, maybe I wasn't getting enough people to subscribe? That happens in Hello Audio, right? Where it's like someone gets sent the email to subscribe, but they don't click and they don't put it in their app. And so, like, maybe you need to do more email campaign or a video or something showing them how to do it. Or, yeah, like you found out, the more they listen to, the more likely they were to convert. What can I do to can get them to listen? Or maybe your drop off is really high on the first 3 episodes because a lot of apps auto download those. What can you do to get them to keep listening? So I think diving deep really gives you some levers that you can pull for even greater success moving forward.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I did a massive data poll a couple months ago ahead of the Cubicle to CEO podcast, and I'm curious. I had loads of downloads over the summer as well,
Mm. Hmm.
and a lot of conversions into Launch Your Own Way. So I'm curious to kind of do an updated report, and maybe I'll
That
share
would be
that on
cool.
my Instagram as like a helpful thing for people because I really think it's such a beautiful lead generator, and there is so much data that you could pull. So
Mm.
one of the stats that I pulled is that the fact that there were so many people who converted, not for that launch at the time, but the April launch I had was one of my biggest launches ever. So many of those were from the private
The
podcasts. So it
repeat
really is
person.
this
Yeah.
like incredible conversion tool for your business. I really don't know why more people don't use it.
I know, right? You've come to the right place to tell. No,
Yeah,
it's true. And we always like to say too, and I'll say this over and over again, that podcast player that has the podcast that they've signed up for, if they were listening to it in November and then they saw a new episode come out, it's an inbox. And I don't think people realize it. They realize it when they're consuming podcasts because they're like, oh, Amy Porterfield has a new episode out and it gets moved to the top or whatever. But that's an inbox. And so if
yeah,
you are the person that they're seeing, or you have a bunch of products that are all private podcasts, like they're basically buying all your things. That's like a raving fan at its finest, as the descriptor of a raving fan. I think
totally.
from that perspective, thinking about it sitting in the inbox of the podcast player and floating up when something new happens, that's huge. And I don't think email has the same. Email can have that, and that's why email will never die. But there is something about the inbox of an email system, or you've been auto filtered, and the person doesn't even know you're launching because you're under a tag or a label. That happens to me all
Totally.
the time. I'm just like, wait, why am I not getting your emails? Oh yeah, I like hid you in the marketing thing that I never open. So if you think about it like that, it's something that brings attention and brings people back over a length of time. And it sounds like by you using it twice now or having 2 launches on the back end of that podcast, it's had success and it's building. And that's what we want in business and in marketing, right? Is the efforts that we're taking and the decisions we're making in our company are building to a larger thing. And it's not just that first time you do it, it's what you do after and to the next thing. So very cool and
Yeah.
thinking about a private podcast in that way.
It was really cool doing it as a limited series as well,
Mm,
because even though I can always add case studies to it and I can always add Q&A episodes to it to keep it fresh, I think just giving someone something short and sweet and digestible where it doesn't feel like they have to tune in every single week or they have loads of
mm,
episodes to catch up on, they can kind of just like binge the series and walk away with super actionable, tangible tools. Like even if they never sign up for Launch Your Own Way, if they just get the warm up, a $99 product, it can really, really, really help their business
mm.
with it's so, so actionable. So I think that there's something really special about the limited series, and I think I don't see as many people doing the limited series. So that I would really recommend that if you're looking to start, but you don't want to commit to like an ongoing podcast, because I also found that really daunting as someone who
Mhm.
has new ideas all the time, gets bored really easily. It was awesome to do the limited series.
Yeah, I think of it like it's an asset it's got boundaries, right? Like you teach
Yes,
this, it has an outcome, it has so many
just
episodes
like
that
a
you
course. Yeah.
just like our course. We had our coaching call, first one back um, of the summer. And yeah, someone was doing an ongoing private podcast and she was like, yeah, people aren't really listening. They're not really signing up. It was off the back end of her newsletter. And we're kind of like, well, it sounds like they're getting newsletter stuff and then they have to go get more stuff and it never ends. And like, why are they going there? Right. And it was kind of this
Right.
aha moment where wouldn't it be just easier to solve a problem and keep it in this container that guess what? Is easier for you because now you don't have to come up with something to say every week or every few weeks or something like that. So that
Exactly.
light bulb moment, I think, for that type of piece of content, it's something you create. It can work once. It's something that's really easy to add to, and it's something that is in a container, an asset that can be used over and over again in different capacities. So yes, we love a good series. We love a good limited series over here.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing and definitely the most powerful tool. I mean, I don't run ads or anything. Everything I do is
Mm.
organic. But I'd say conversion wise, when I looked at the stats, it was clear that the warm up did the legwork for the effort put in.
And you said you launched a bunch of free, I think you said free private podcasts, or you've dabbled in free before you went to paid. Is there any differences maybe that you want to highlight there for somebody listening as they're trying to make that decision for their business?
I've never dabbled in free. I have
Hmm.
dabbled in a lot of freebies in general, and
Sure.
I
Okay.
really think that I'm at the stage of my business where I really want to segment people better,
Mm,
understand like, who's actually converting. I think there's so many people out there, especially from the relatively small pool of creative service providers. It's a very incestuous
mm,
group of people. Everyone kind of buys each other's things, learns from each other. And to me, it just felt like the same people were always downloading my freebies. They weren't really converting. They weren't moving the needle in their business. And there just is something to be said about people who are willing to like put their credit card down and be like, I really want to solve this problem. I'm willing
mm,
to invest money into it. And I just find when you do segment out people, that doesn't mean that doesn't mean people who get the freebie aren't going to convert. But it was really interesting using almost this in between lead generator with the private podcast, which was, $49. It wasn't a massive investment to see how much more powerful it was for converting. Because, like I said, they have buying power. They're just way more willing to invest in themselves, is really the
yeah.
bottom line.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head of I really want to solve this problem. That's how you have to look at the role that private podcast plays in your ecosystem that you're creating. So if you're listening and you're like, okay, cool, I totally want to replicate this or do something like this in my business, what's the problem that needs to be solved before the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it usually agitates like, okay, cool, I solved this problem, but now, right, what after the warm up is the launch itself? Like I need help with that. And so
Yeah.
thinking about it from that perspective, if you're listening, solving a problem that someone's willing to pay for, and then it leads well into your next thing, whether it's one on one coaching or a group program or a course.
Love that. Yeah. What's like the micro problem they need before your high ticket thing? Is there's always something that could move the needle for them before or better prep them to be
Mm,
in that higher ticket thing. And
yeah,
I feel
because
like
if they do the warm up, then they're going to have a better launch, right? And that's what you
yes,
want. Hmm.
exactly. And I think like for anyone who's listening that's like, "Ooh, what could my version of that be?" Yeah, I think the best question like you said is what do they need? What's that micro problem that they need solving before they enter this high ticket offer?
Perfect. Cool. Is there any other advice maybe that you have for somebody looking to kind of launch their first private podcast? Something you wish you knew before you did it? Or, yeah, maybe a hot tip coming off of our discussion?
Well, that's such a good question. I think have fun with it. Been experimenting with lots of different, I mean, that's such a boring answer, but I have been having a lot of fun just trying different things. So I've included it now in a lot of my programs as like to, archive the recorded calls,
Mm.
or do some onboarding that just helps kind of walk them through and welcome them to whatever I'm offering. I did a online summit earlier this year that was audio only.
Oh, awesome.
Didn't follow the normal summit model where it's like upsell them into this thing. It was literally
Mm.
just one flat price to sign up and listen to. I think we had like 16 speakers over 2 days that I just uploaded onto there. And then we had the Geneva, which is like a group chat where they would like kind of answer questions throughout the days. Super easy, low lift, no upsells, no gimmicks, just like fun little audio podcast. I love collaboration, so it was really cool getting some of my favorite creatives together to talk on areas of their expertise. It was called the, Rose Talk Summit. It was all
Cute.
about, like, getting more visible in your business. So that was super fun, just, like, fun, experimental, low stakes, audio only, so I didn't feel like I had to do my makeup and, like, record a bunch of stuff online or sit at the computer all day, and people loved that. It was such a good
Mm.
warm-up tool, community building tool. And then I also released like a mini course over the summer called Summer Profit Framework, all about creating a micro offer. That's very
Oh,
much like
perfect.
the warm up to help people, you know, build something like that into their offer ecosystem. So I'm
Smart.
just having a lot of fun with it, seeing like where I can kind of infuse it into every touch point of my business
Mm.
to make the client experience better, build community, which is a massive value of mine, and really let my expertise shine in different ways that I haven't been able to do with, like, how loud social media is and
Right.
just finicky it is. Like, every time I'm on there, just you never know how it's gonna perform, so it's just awesome. I just love it as a medium, and I'm having so much fun with it. Like, it's not that serious, just publish something and see how it goes.
I think that's a really big bonus, positive side effect, whatever, of like doing audio podcasts. It's like so much in our business can feel very hard, like in many different seasons in business. And it's like when something feels easy, light, fun, like those things tend to do better, right? And
Yes.
so
Oh
here
my
we
god,
have
totally.
like something that's innovative. Not everyone's doing it. You have something that's super easy to create. It's great for the listener themselves. There's just so many positives wrapped around these private podcasts. Like, I'm with you. I'm like, why does not everyone have this in every part of their business, even if you just tried it once? But that idea that it's just easy and light and fun and an experiment. That's another thing we like to make it seem like
Yeah.
it's okay if it doesn't work because you didn't put all this effort into it potentially. Like maybe you record a different intro or like a different intro episode, or maybe, yeah, you solve a different problem. That one didn't really work out. But when you don't put so much effort into it and it fails, and I'm doing air quotes, doesn't do maybe and hit the goals or numbers that you thought it would, it's kind of one of those things of like, okay, well, at least I didn't build an entire course in Kajabi. Like we're
Right.
talking about you recorded some audio episodes, right? And dragged and dropped into Hello Audio. It's pretty simple. So yeah, I
Totally.
wish more people would look at it that way. Make it light, make it fun. I think we have a lot of users. Sometimes I can, whenever I go into support inbox, which is not my place to be, I should never be in there. But whenever I see what's going on in there, and it's sometimes people overcomplicate things. They're like, this is happening and this is happening. I'm hearing this zap and this isn't going. And we're just like, why do you have it set up like that? I know it can do it. I know we can do it, but take it a step back. Let's make it simple. Let's make it easy. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it really is such a simple, easy tool. Like, all you have to do is sign up, like, have your MP3 or MP4, drag it in, change the name, write a little description, put in links if you want, and then press publish, and it's
and then boom.
on the Apple Podcast. If you are like me and just like to kind of take action and try things, it could not be an easier
Mm,
barrier of entry.
yeah,
Yeah,
100%. That's what we love. We need some things to be easy. Cool.
totally.
Well, we didn't really talk about like your audience. I mean, we've heard like a little bit of you, like how people liked it. Is there any like standout feedback that you have of your listeners of the experience of using or listening to your podcast, and maybe any of them?
I literally get DMs all the time about how amazing it is, how much they learned, how they were able to like actually implement, actionable steps in each episode because they learn better when they're walking around
Mm,
or when they're away from their computer. A lot of people ended up launching their own private podcasts too because they were so inspired by their own transformation with learning that way. and how much it just hooked them and helped them that they're like, "Oh, I should do this in my own version," which, I love. I'm like, "Yes, more people should sign up." But yeah, I mean, it's such an effective tool. I think it really helped people move the needle in the areas of business that I teach a lot about sales. And
Mm,
I just think that's the one area of business that people just ignore so much because there's so much shadow around it. People just hate selling.
mm.
They hate being sold to, and they think that they have to sell in this really icky way. So they just avoid it. So the whole purpose of that podcast was like, here's just really simple, easy steps to get people who are maybe already in your ecosystem to make a purchase or get more people into your ecosystem to make a purchase. Because most people just have, if you ask them like how they're getting leads, it's like word of mouth or Instagram. And it's okay,
Mm.
that's not a sales ecosystem. That's not going to create super fans. That's not going to create repeat customers. So we really need to like do the groundwork before we try to sell anything to make sure we have that trust in place to have a sustainable business. So I think it really helped people in that respect.
Yeah, that's great. I think when you have folks DMing you regularly about it is awesome. And it's funny because you bring up something that I think has been one of the parts of Hello Audio that we're like, people don't realize maybe how easy it is to learn from audio. And I understand people have different ways of processing information. And for some
Yeah.
people, they will never be able to process audio wise. But I think some people write it off because they're like, I need to see it. And it's like, you also need to just do it. So,
Yeah.
if you need to see
Totally.
it and you're not logging into the app, then you're not learning anything. So maybe give audio a shot because it's a lot more likely that you're actually gonna go through the content, and I think that surprises people. And
Yeah.
based on
I
what
think
I know about, like, adult learning too, it's just we think we have a way we like learning, but then when you actually are told to recall the information, your learning preference has like no impact on it. It's other things like repetition and stuff like that. And so when you take away this idea of that we think we have a preference and it's more about actually putting in the effort to learn something, then it's like, oh, that's why I'm not getting the information, even though I think it's the way I want it to be presented, if that makes sense.
yeah, like, you asked about my audience, they're all creatives, I call them squiggly
Mm.
creatives, they're people who have ADHD or they have
Mhm.
a lot of them have dyslexia, learning disabilities, they're, like, highly creative people, and I count myself among them, I have ADHD, and so it's a situation where I don't like sitting in front of a computer for
No.
hours on end listening to
Mhm.
someone with a presentation. Like, I
Yeah.
really would prefer not to do that. I learn way better if I'm, like, cooking while I'm listening or on a walk while I'm listening or doodling even, like, doing something
Mhm.
else to kind of occupy a different part of my brain. So I think, like, audio is actually really great for my particular audience. I've had really, really good feedback. The best thing is when they, like, screenshot that they're listening to it and put it in their stories and are, like,
Mm.
on a walk or with their kids at the beach or just living their lives offline, but having, still putting in the work and learning
Mm.
something at the same time. I think that's just like such a nice feeling for me to be like, good, you're out and about, you're getting your 10K steps in, you're cooking yourself a nourishing meal, you're not having to sit in front of the computer any more than you need to.
Yeah. Block like, away from your kids in the dark. Just
Yeah,
imagining, like,
exactly.
here I am doing my work. This has been such a fun conversation. I
Yay,
loved
thank
hearing
you.
the background of this. I knew we would be able to, go a little bit deeper behind the scenes of your feed and the successes with it. So definitely
Thank
keep us
you.
posted. If you get any ahas coming through, but we can definitely have you back on and do a little mini update episode or something like that. Cause I think we're interviewing lots of people and then they like launch a feed and they're like, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with this one. And I'm like, tell us, let us know. We'll have you back. I think people would be super into that. So let
Yeah,
me
I love
know
that. I'm
and keep
such an
us posted.
advocate for Hello Audio. I tell everyone about it. I'm like, definitely
Awesome.
need to sign up for some sort of an affiliate link if you have them
Oh
because
yeah. You
I
don't,
feel like I'm good.
that's crazy.
This I
We
mean, this
could,
is this is a squiggly
yeah.
creative. I like before I was on this podcast, I was on the phone trying to get like a password for an account that I couldn't like this is my
Yeah,
life.
sounds about right.
So I need to find this affiliate link. But once I do, I'm sure I'll be a top affiliate because I just love telling
Oh,
everyone
that's
about it.
awesome. I would, the side conversation in the public, but we'd love to help you make an offer potentially if it fits with your course program. Like it sounds like if some folks want to try launching with audio or something like that, maybe we can come up with a cool offer
Yeah.
that lives
Oh
inside
my
your
God.
program.
I
Yeah.
help people with offer development like all day. So that would be
Cool. Let's
amazing.
do it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yay.
Awesome. Well, everyone
Thanks for
wins on this
having me.
podcast. Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah, I
coming.
love to yap. So a podcast of
Same.
any sort, private, public, yeah, it's a good medium for me.
Yeah, same. All right. Well, thank you so much. We have to end with the favorite question for everyone. If you had a podcast, a private one, of course, of your life ramblings, what would it be called?
Oh my gosh, it would have to be the squig because
Yeah.
that's what I call myself. I'm a squiggly creative. Everything I do is a bit scrambly. I'm trying to be less that way. I told my husband when we get back to Australia, we need like an organizational week where I like recover all my passwords and
Mm,
get myself organized. But yeah, I think I just, grew up very all over the place. And, that's such a superpower when it comes to entrepreneurship,
mhm,
but it can also
mhm.
be a real challenge.
Yes, it can feel daunting. Yes, so
Yeah.
I echo all of that. Same ADHD, like diagnosed a lot later in life.
Yep.
And running a business is hard because I would watch people online. I'm like, or even some friends that I knew, like how they were running their business behind the scenes. I was like, I'm never going to be good at this. Like, if that's what it
Hmm.
takes, if it takes me waking up at 5 a.m. and doing the same thing every day and having X metric and whatever, I'm like, I'm done. I'm doomed. And then clearly finding out that there's reasons why my brain works like that and that it's a positive. I just need
It's a
support in
positive.
these other areas. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So very cool.
Awesome.
Well, I love that you're supporting people like us
Same.
because we definitely can be successful in business. That's for sure. Thank you,
We're
Kelsey.
both living examples of that. Thank you.
Exactly.
Have a great rest of your day
Awesome.
and congrats again
Same to you.
on your new baby.
Thank you and have a safe trip tomorrow.
Thank you.
And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.